Damian Thompson is up next, but first, some more news to share with you. Pope Francis made history this week as the first pope to visit the Arabian Peninsula. It coincided with the 800th anniversary of St. Francis's visit with the Sultan of Egypt. During his Wednesday general audience, the Pope said that his trip to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates was a step forward in the Catholic-Muslim dialogue. He met with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar and signed a joint document on human fraternity. More about the document and what it means for interreligious dialogue in our next segment. And after credible accusations of sex abuse, the Vatican has laicized American Father Richard Dashbach, a former Divine Word missionary who ran orphanages in East Timor for 27 years. Accusations surfaced early in 2018 that Dashbach had been sexually abusing young girls who were in his care. The case is now under investigation by local police. And a priest in the Diocese of Saginaw, Michigan, has been removed from his parish by the diocesan administrator for allegedly causing division by making the liturgy more traditional. Father Edwin Dwyer was removed January 30th as parochial administrator of Our Lady of Peace Parish by Bishop Walter Hurley. In a letter to parishioners, Hurley wrote, "For some time now, I've been aware of a number of issues, particularly with the liturgy, that have divided the parish community." In January, Father Dwyer held a meeting to explain his celebration of the liturgy to parishioners, the use of incense and bells, the traditional vestments, and additions of Latin and Gregorian chant. The diocese will continue to provide salary, benefits, and housing to Father Dwyer as he awaits a new assignment. Here with analysis of that and much more is editor-in-chief of the Catholic Herald in the UK and a 25-year veteran reporter on church affairs, which means he's at least as exhausted as I am. Please welcome Damian Thompson joining us from London tonight. Damian, thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's a great honor to be here.
The honor's ours. I want to jump right into this document that the Pope signed with the Grand Mufti this week in Abu Dhabi. The passage that has sparked some controversy reads this way: "Freedom is a right of every person. Each individual enjoys the freedom of belief, thought, expression, and action. The pluralism and diversity of religions, color, sex, race, and language are willed by God in His wisdom through which He created human beings. The divine wisdom is the source of which the right to freedom of belief and the freedom to be different derives. Therefore, the fact that people are forced to adhere to a certain religion or culture must be rejected as to the imposition of a cultural way of life that others do not accept." Your thoughts on particularly that bit of the line where it talks about God willing a plurality of religions?
Well, on the whole, it's boring multi-faith waffle that I've heard so many times over the years that your eyes glaze over when you read it.
Yeah.
But a lot of Catholics are rather concerned by this reference to God willing religious diversity. And at the Catholic Herald, we've attempted to put an orthodox interpretation on it, which you can do. Dr. Chad Pecknold, who's one of our fantastic American commentators and scholars, has done so. Father Zulsdorf has as well. It's becoming a little bit tiring constantly having to put an orthodox spin on statements made or signed by the Pope. By and large, I think it's something that Catholics shouldn't worry about too much. It is possible to interpret willed as permitted. The Pope didn't really elucidate matters very much in his interview on the plane back, but then he rarely does. If the purpose of signing the statement was to secure freedom of worship for Christians in the Middle East, particularly in Muslim countries, then that's very, very valuable and much more encouraging and less disturbing to my mind.
Yeah, and maybe that was the intention here.
Appalling Concordat that was signed with China.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this a way, and some are suggesting, that Pope Francis is committing to barring Catholics from evangelizing Muslims? That isn't what you think he's doing here.
I think that's a rather sinister interpretation of it. I think Catholics and Christians generally have enough difficulty just worshipping themselves without trying to evangelize, which is likely to lead to sudden death. And I don't see that situation changing in certain parts of the Middle East. And you can't generalize about all these countries.
No.
I think that's a rather paranoid interpretation of it. This could be one of the most successful ventures of this pontificate. Let's hope so.
Yeah. Aboard the plane on Tuesday, while the Pope was returning to Rome, he acknowledged the mistreatment and sexual abuse of religious women by bishops and priests. He admitted it was a problem, something he's working on. He also suggested that this abuse may still be ongoing. Now, if bishops are engaging in this behavior, Damian, isn't that exclusively within the Pope's authority to stop and mete out appropriate punishments?
It is within the Pope's authority, and I don't think I've met a Catholic for a very long time who doesn't wish that the Pope had done more, and specifically revealed more about what he knew and when about the behavior of certain bishops, and above all, of course, the appalling Theodore McCarrick.
Yeah. Well, the summit on sexual abuse, as you know, is taking place February 21st through 24th. The Pope has said we need to deflate expectations. And the stated focus here, again, and I want everybody to be clear on this, the stated focus is the protection of minors. But with stories of seminarians and now nuns being abused, and the Pope admitting it's ongoing, is the focus of the summit too narrow, in your opinion?
Well, if the focus is just on the protection of minors, then that's very disturbing, because we know that seminarians have been molested and threatened sexually by bishops, and the authorities have turned a blind eye to it for years. We're also pretty sure, I'll just come out and say it, that Archbishop Vigano told the Pope that Cardinal McCarrick had corrupted generations of seminarians and priests. Therefore, if the focus is not on that subject as well as the molestation of minors, then indeed the focus of this summit is far too narrow and dangerously so.
Last week, the Pope said he thought the expectations of the meeting on abuse, as we mentioned a moment ago, needed to be deflated, and he added, the problems of abuse will continue. It is a human problem everywhere. What do you make of that statement?
Well, it's true, but it's kind of is it a truism? I mean, it's stating the obvious. But if what the Pope is trying to say is there's nothing much we can do about this, then I respectfully disagree with him. There's a lot he can do about it.
Yeah.
He could begin, for example, by thoroughly investigating the case of Theodore McCarrick. I'm sorry to keep mentioning his name, but the fact that the Pope has not clarified what he knew and when, again repeating myself, bothers me almost more than anything else about this pontificate.
Damian, from the very beginning, I suggested doing a forensic audit of every diocese and maybe every parish in the world, and because that would quickly determine who was misusing funds, and we would then be led to whether they were engaged in corruption or side relationships. Would you support something like that? And if the Pope has it within his authority...
I definitely support it. It'll obviously be a very expensive exercise. It'll also be a rather scary exercise, because until now the focus has been on America particularly and the West. I am certain that there are hellholes of abuse throughout the developed world that we know nothing about whatsoever, and which will make even the appalling behavior of some American clergy put it in a really horrible perspective of global abuse. So it's a good thing that this summit is about global abuse, but I very much doubt that we will get down to the serious business of examining what goes on in Latin America, what goes on in Africa, what goes on in India, from where I hear horrible stories.
Yeah. In an open letter to German Cardinal Reinhard Marx, published on Sunday in a German daily, 9 German Catholics are demanding that the Catholic Church hit reset and make a fresh start when it comes to the Church's teaching on sexual morality, including reasonable and just evaluation of homosexuality. They asked for ordained women and that diocesan priests should be able to choose whether or not to live a celibate life. Now, given that so many initiatives of this papacy have come or found their origins in Germany, do you see these innovations bubbling up I mean, we hear a little bit of this celibacy question being prattled about, even on the papal plane, which we'll get to in a second.
Well, by what authority does the German church raise these questions? I mean, the only authority the German church has is money, as far as I can work out. Nobody goes to their services, which are so heavily Protestantized as to be, barely distinguishable from Lutheran services. I think we've had enough from Cardinal Marx, frankly. What really jumped out at me was a reference to ordained women. Now, we'll be told that this refers to ordaining women as deacons, which apparently is something that the church is free to discuss. I would strongly urge that it doesn't discuss it, because rather than pressing the reset button, I think it would press the nuclear button. But if we take that a step further to the ordination of women priests, we know that that's something that the church doesn't have the authority to do. So if women are designated as priests, they will be designated as priests in a sect outside the Catholic Church. And if Cardinal Marx wants to lead that and stop being a cardinal and apostatize, then there's nothing I can do to stop him. And maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing to happen.
Well, Pope Francis did comment this past week on this topic of celibacy. He was actually on his way back from World Youth Day, and he said this: "Personally, I believe that celibacy is a gift to the church. Secondly, I'm not in agreement with allowing optional celibacy, no." However, he continued, and he said, "There could only be a possibility of these far, far away places, I think, about the islands in the Pacific. It's something to think about when there's a pastoral need. There, the shepherd has to think about the faithful." So, Damian, on the one hand, he's saying no to optional celibacy, but then he seems to be opening a door.
Well, how many times has he done this? He says one thing, contradicts himself within the space of 2 or 3 minutes, and leaves everybody scratching their heads. I've had enough of this pattern of improvisation, which is why I would implore the Holy Father to stop thinking on his feet, because he's not especially good at it. And all he does is sow confusion and spark completely unnecessary debates at a time when, frankly, the Western Church is in terrible decline. There is a case to be made for ordaining married men as priests in certain circumstances. But this sort of thinking aloud, incredibly disorganized and sort of improvisation, is not making that case.
Yeah, well, we already have ordained married men via the ordinariates.
We do, and actually it works quite well. I mean, we have it in the East, and we also have it. We also have it in Britain, where there's quite a large number of married men who've come over and been successful priests. I personally don't have much of a problem with it. The idea of women deacons horrifies me, because I think essentially the Catholic Church will fall apart if they go down that route.
Very quickly, I want your take on this priest in Saginaw, Michigan, Father Edward Dwyer, who was relieved of his duty for trying to incorporate more reverent elements into his weekly Mass. He was bringing back some of the Latin. He had incorporated chant.
I know. I was furious when I read this story. As far as I can work out, this priest was gently trying to make the worship in his church more Catholic. And I say gently because he wasn't introducing the traditional Latin Mass.
No.
As far as I know, he wasn't suggesting that they suddenly start worshipping ad orientem, which would be a bit of a culture shock for the parishioners. I read this as the establishment of the parish, the older liberal establishment of the parish, very unhappy with a very vigorous return to tradition and orthodoxy by inquisitive young people who are looking for Mass and for the church to become, excuse the jargon, a sacred space, which is very, very distinctively different from the outside world, as opposed to this horrible 1970s style worship with music that I call it Joan Baez meets Hildegard Bingham in a 1970s cocktail lounge. I mean, even when I was young, we hated it. I mean, just honestly, and this bishop has furthermore suggested that people who want traditional worship, by which he just means Mass done properly,
right,
according to the rubrics of the new Missal and the rules of Vatican II, should be herded off, and have a Mass which accommodates their exotic desires for Catholic Mass. Well, I'd suggest the opposite. Maybe that there could be a sort of Summorum Pontificum in reverse, where the old liberals could be herded off and do their sort of Donny Osmond masses, and priests could be found to learn the strange worship songs which you never encounter in the outside world.
No.
And are quite hideous.
It's
really one of my bugbears.
It's a bizarre story, and I agree with you.
We're going to see more of this, because these people will not let go. And I wonder if it's the parishioners, or I wonder if it's a little group of empowered parishioners who've been running the show for ages. Priest friends of mine find this problem when they take over a new parish.
But
there's a group of lay people who are ministers of this, that, and the other, think they can call the shots, and think they know what's good for everybody else.
Well, Jamie, the troubling thing is,
like a 1970s Christmas special.
The troubling thing is here, the priest was trying to reach out to young parishioners, and they were excited about learning chant. People were excited about the whole
bishop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what freaked out the bishop. But notice that the bishop also removed this poor priest from his job as a chaplain at the university. Is the bishop, and he's not even the bishop of the diocese, he's the apostolic administrator. Is the bishop worried that young people might be contaminated by being introduced to the riches of the Catholic liturgical tradition, which, by the way, is one of the things that we at the Catholic Herald celebrate with the greatest joy?
Turning to something more personal, I want to end on this. I noticed your sister Carmel is suffering from ovarian cancer, and last week you had her on your podcast, and you asked her about what role her faith has played in her positive attitude in dealing with her illness. Here's a bit of what she had to say.
It's easy to feel buoyed up by faith when things are going reasonably well in your life, and to pray more and to go to Mass more when things are going well. With the turn of events with this, and I think coming so soon after Mummy died, her example has helped me recalibrate my faith in a way, because she bore her Parkinson's disease and all the things that she had to go through at the end of her life with such courage, such fortitude. She's almost stood before me as an example to try and have faith that there is a guiding light, that there is more than appears on the surface, and to trust in God.
How has watching your mother and now your sister deepened your own faith, Damian?
It didn't at first. I thought, how could you let this happen? Carmel experienced the first symptoms of ovarian cancer, which are really cruel in so many ways. It's a very complicated and nasty cancer, and the symptoms seem benign at first, and that's why it's caught late. And it was the most horrible moment of my life, was going into the consulting room to hear the specialist tell her that she had stage 4 ovarian cancer. And I thought, how could you do this? We've just buried our beloved mother, and there's only 2 of us in the family. In the immediate family, we have lovely cousins, but there's only 2 of us. So it did nothing for my faith whatsoever. But then Carmel reacted to it in a way that I hadn't anticipated, maybe she hadn't, with a bravery that is almost beyond my comprehension. And her faith was not challenged by this. It seems to have been deepened by it. And I mean, I can't tell you how proud I am of her. I just cannot tell you how I already loved her very much and admired her, but I can't tell you what a shining example she is to those many, many Catholic women and women generally who are suffering from this particularly terrible form of cancer. And I would earnestly ask EWTN viewers to pray for my sister Carmel, because she wants you to, and she asked me if I would ask you to do that.
Absolutely.
And I know you will, and thank you very much. She's the most wonderful person.
We'll certainly join you in that. It was a beautiful podcast. I encourage people to go give it a listen. Damian Thompson, thank you so much for being here. It's a delight. We'll have you back soon, I hope.
I really look forward to that. Thanks so much.
Excellent. And be sure to check out the Catholic Herald at catholicherald.us. Damian is, of course, the editor-in-chief at the Catholic Herald.